Okay, we're going to be talking about what a function is in algebra. So this is a huge topic in math, and literally, um, this video can be extremely long if I was going to try to teach you, in depth of everything you need to know about functions. Okay, so that's definitely not the purpose of this video. This video is just an introduction to the concept, and there's a lot of ways to explain what a function is. You can do it in a more technical manner. What I want to do is just give you a general feel, okay, really solid introduction foundation to the idea of what a function is, and then we'll kind of build upon that. We'll give you some technical information on there, but by no means is this video going to be able to explain everything about a function. What I would suggest is if you like the way I teach and explain things, I offer full and complete math courses at my academy. I'll leave the link in the description below if you want to check those out. If you take any one of my courses, pre-algebra, algebra, or any advanced course beyond that, they'll have the topic of functions in there. So you'll get a lot more instruction on functions, a lot more detail and all the subtopics related to functions. Also, on my YouTube channel as well, hope you consider subscribing. I do a ton of other videos on math, and I have other videos on functions that would certainly help you out as well. But with that being said, let's get into the idea of what a function is. So I think the way I want to approach this is just to write out a real basic function as we see them frequently in algebra. Okay, so this is an example of what a function looks like. Now, functions can look like different things, but it's very common for algebra students to see them written out like so. Okay, now let's just get this basic terminology down here. We have this function. So how do we even say this function, right? Well, this little f and x right here, we call this f of x, f of x. So f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. So that's how we would say this particular function. Now the f is the name of the function, okay, and the x, all this has a purpose. I'll explain that to you in a second. One thing I want you to realize is that a function, okay, it's very common to see functions written out as f of x in algebra, but that's not like a hard and fast rule that all functions must be named with an f and an x. You can have functions like h of x is equal to 2x plus 1. You can have functions like g of t, okay, and that would be like 2t plus 1. So you can see the pattern here, right? This x, the x inside the parentheses is the same variable over here. So whatever variable I put over here is going to be in this little part of the function right there, okay? Now, of course, I'm, glossing over a lot of things here, but I often feel like sometimes students just, learn best by just looking at getting a feel for what things are, okay? And we'll kind of skip the formal instruction here. There's a time and place for that for sure, but right now I just want you to get a real general idea, a good feel for what a function is, and we'll do away with a lot of the scary stuff right up front, okay? So anyways, so this is a basic example of a function. Now, what do we do with functions, okay? Well, what we do with the functions, there's a lot we can do with them, but one of the most common things is what we do is something called evaluate. Now, a function is more or less a rule, okay? So these things are essentially a rule, and I'm going to show you how that rule works. So when I evaluate a function, I'm going to be using the rule of the function. So let's evaluate this function. All right, so I'm going to evaluate this for 3. So notice I'm replacing this x with a 3, okay? What I'm doing is I'm putting an input value into my function. Think of my function as a machine. Let's kind of do it over here. Let's say I had this crazy machine. All right, some sort of like something you would see at a factory or something, right? And this is my function rule, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm going to throw into my little machine here the input value of 3. Okay, so I'm going to throw it into this machine. So I'm hoping that something comes out, and something will come out. Now, what do we know? This is the input. How do we know what the output value is going to be? Well, what we're going to do is, you see this is an x right here. I have to replace whatever value I substituted this x for this x over here. So this is going to be 2 times 3 plus 1. So when I finish this out, I'm going to get f of 3 is equal to 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7. Okay, so let's go back to this conceptual model. When I threw in a 3 into my little function machine, okay, a 7 popped out. Okay, so far, if you understand this, this is a really good idea of what a function is. A function is a rule, okay, where we plug in, where we throw in input values and we get certain type of output values back, okay. That effectively is a function. So this was our input and this was our output. Now I'm going to share with you something that's really critical about a function, okay? And this is key, okay? Because this is part of what I'm going to tell you is tested, or you'll see a lot of quiz questions and test questions about functions, about what I'm going to explain to you here in a second, okay? Now, I threw in a 3 here, I got a 7. So let's throw in another value. I'm going to be explaining this concept here in a second. Let's throw in the value of 5. Okay, so let's say we had a big bag over here and different values. Okay, we had a 3, we threw in a 3, here's a 5. Okay, just think of these as different numbers that we could just kind of reach into this bag and throw them into our machine. So we took this 3, okay, we found a 3, we threw it in, we got a 7. Okay, so 3 produced a 7. Now, I'm going to throw this 5 into this machine, and what's going to happen there? So it's going to erase this. We'll do the same thing for 5. Okay, so f of 5, right? I'm going to evaluate. In other words, evaluate just means you can effectively think of that as put that number into our machine, into our rule. So f of 5 is going to be 2 times 5 plus 1. So this is 10 plus 1, or 11. So f of 5 turned out to be 11. So when I threw a 5 in, I got 11 out. Okay. Now here is the key. Okay. Let's say I went into my bag, my handy bag of numbers, and I found another 3. Okay. You're like, oh, I found another 3. All right. I'm going to go take that 3 here, and I'm going to throw it into my machine. Okay. Now, what would you expect to happen? Okay, in this particular machine? Well, we would expect that we would get another 7, right? Hopefully, when we threw another 3 back in, we would get a 7. Now, if in fact when you threw in that 3, and you can throw in all 3s and you get the same output value, okay, the 7, that is a function. Now, what can happen sometimes, there's something else in math called a relation, that we could actually take another value, let's say a 3, okay, and when we put it back into the machine, it turned out to be something else. Let's say like negative 6, right? So if we threw in that same value and it turned out to be another number, that would be something other than a function, okay? So conceptually speaking, all right, a function is a type of rule, okay, such that when you plug in an input value, you get one and only one output value. Okay, so for 3, when we plug in a 3, you're only going to get 7. When we plug in a 5, we're only going to get 11. Okay, so there are things in mathematics, they're called relations. Okay, and matter of fact, a function is a particular type of relation that has these properties, but there's other things in math that you could have values in a particular rule that will generate different output values. You can have the same input value that can generate different output values. That's totally possible in mathematics. But those type of algebraic relationships are not a function. That would be categorized as a particular type of relation. So I'm using different terms here, right? Relations, functions. Again, let's break it down. A function is a certain type of relation such that when I plug in my input values, I always get one and only one output value. That is really critical. I really want you to hone in on that because that is kind of the key definition of what a function is in algebra. Okay, now let's take this a little bit further for this video, just a little bit more, because again, I can keep going on and on and on and on and on. I'll give you a little bit of example, some other things you're going to be studying in functions. I'm not going to get into them, but I'll show you a few other things. But I do want to leave you with two terms, okay, words that you need to know about functions, and that is domain and range. Domain and range. So at an introductory level, you need to know what these words mean. So domain, the domain of a function, are all the values that we're allowed to plug in to our rule. Okay, so all the input values are called the domain. Okay, and they're associated with an x. Okay, the x variable. Okay, so again, we have a particular rule, a machine, if you will, okay, and all the values that that will work when you plug into that machine are called the domain. So you might say, well, can't we put every single number, all types of numbers into a rule? No, you cannot. Okay, you cannot. Let me give you a quick example of why that would be. Okay, let's say I have this function. Let's see here, 10 over x. Okay, so this is f of x is equal to 10 over x. You're like, okay, remember, this is just a different machine. This is just a different type of rule. Okay, so our first rule up here is this. This was the machine 2x plus 1. Now this rule is just the machine, 10 over x. Okay, we're going to be plugging in our domain, our x input values, and then we'll get some output values. And let's just define what the output values are here now. That is the range. So the range is all the output values you get based upon the input values. Now there's another term here I want to tell you about, and that's called dependent. Okay, the output values are dependent upon what input values you get. Okay, so basically it's the input is going to generate the outputs. Okay, so the outputs are dependent upon what inputs you put in. Okay, not the other way around. But let me go back to the domain. Okay, and why we have to be careful on what numbers we plug into our machine. Okay, so let's take this example. So you're saying, well, here I can plug in anything I want in my input, right? I could plug in 10, I could plug in negative numbers, and this thing would work out. In other words, I can have f of negative 100, and that would be 10 over negative 100. I can do the math on this. I can get a number, an actual value, no problem. Okay, if I plugged in a fraction, a decimal, doesn't make a difference. I'll still get an actual value. However, what happens if I do this? F of 0, and I try to plug the input value of 0 into my little machine here. So that would be 10 over 0. Okay, now this is a problem. And if you don't believe me, take your calculator out and take 10 divided by 0. Not 0 divided by 10, 10 divided by 0. What you should see is an error, okay? You cannot divide any number by 0. Okay, that's what we call undefined in mathematics. So basically, your calculator might start smoking, hopefully it doesn't blow up on you. You can't do it, all right? So it's not allowed. So what we have to think about in this particular rule, okay, this particular function, we can plug everything in, all numbers except 0. We have to take out, we have to remove 0 from our bag of input values. Okay, we have to remove 0. Now there's a lot of mathematical ways to express this. Okay, but basically our domains are not all numbers. Okay, so the domain values of a function can be very specific, right? Sometimes they're all numbers, but sometimes they're just certain sets of numbers. Okay, so in this particular example, everything will work into this machine. Uh, all values are working in this machine except 0. So if you have your little bag of numbers over here and you go, oh look, I got a 0, I'm going to throw it in, you would break the machine. Okay, so we have to remove that. So 0 would not be part of the domain. Okay. Now I want to teach you one other quick thing here about functions, and we'll wrap this up. So let's go back over here and look at this f of x. I know I got a lot of scribbly, scratchy stuff, but I kind of like to keep everything on one page here so we can see what's going on. Again, this is just an introduction to functions. It's a huge topic, so you know, lots to learn, but one step at a time. Now, f of x in a function, this part here is also equal to y, okay? So you're saying, well, what does that mean? Well, this f of x, I can substitute that with the variable y. So I could have y is equal to 2x plus 1, for example. Okay, so here I have the function f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. And here I can have an equivalent equation, y is equal to 2x plus 1. Now, hopefully this kind of looks somewhat familiar to you. This is an equation of a line, okay, where you apply plot x, y points on a line. This is what this is right here, okay? So y is equivalent to f of x, okay? They're the same thing. So our output, our range, okay, is associated with the y variable, right? Again, when we look at functions, okay, I told you earlier that there were certain type of relations. Relations, in essence, in mathematics, okay, are a collection of points on the xy plane. So you can see I'm kind of going down a slippery slope of teaching you more technical stuff. And you're like, okay, now it's getting a little more confusing and it's getting more expansive. So I'm going to kind of stop here because this is a good just place to, keep this as an introduction to a function, right? But again, this is just an introduction. There's a lot more that you need to understand for sure. So real quick, let's just review some main ideas and then we'll wrap this up. So a function is essentially a rule. It's a rule, okay, such that we plug in input values into this rule and we get output values, okay? The input values are the domain, okay, and then we generate output values, which we call the range, okay? And the main idea of a function is that the input values only go to one and only one output value. So whatever we plug in to our machine, we only get one output value, okay? So each domain has exactly one and only, well, each domain value has exactly one and only one output range value. If you understand that, then you're well on your way building up your knowledge of functions. Okay, so let's wrap that up, or let's wrap this up here. Again, I could keep going, and I know it sounds kind of crazy. You're like, oh man, you could just keep talking about this stuff. Well, I've been teaching this for many, many, many years, and you like things because there's application to this. You're like, well, when am I ever going to use this in life and whatnot? Well, you'll be surprised, okay, where this stuff pops up. If you work with any type of software, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Microsoft Excel, for example, which is commonly used in business. They use a lot of functions in there, and you got, a lot of these kind of concepts will kind of come into play. So you never know when you need your math knowledge. But anyways, let's wrap this up. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll find a whole bunch of other videos on functions. I've done hundreds of videos, not on functions, but in mathematics in general. So hope you consider becoming a subscriber. And if you do, hit that bell notification so you get my latest videos. And if this helps you out, if you enjoyed this, I would definitely appreciate a thumbs up and comment. Let me some feedback. I get a lot of comments on my videos. I can't respond to all of them for sure, but I do try to read most of them. It lets me know how I'm doing and gives me ideas on how I can help you with your math education. Lastly, just as a reminder, if you really need a full kind of like course material, full instruction, more in a kind of a formal way for things that you're really going to need to know for a particular test, exam, or class, then you might want to really consider my full courses. And again, I'll leave the link to my academy in the description of this video. With that being said, I hope this video helped you out. Thanks for your time and have a great day.